Hello. Oh, so I'm gonna do that. Okay, setup seems to be working. Now we just have a little more time to wait.
I am just online, so because I
Good.
keep forgetting my meetings.
Oh, good.
How are you doing?
Good. I think it looks like the setup is working.
Oh, so are you on Facebook too?
No, it's YouTube.
So from
Same thing.
YouTube, are comments closed on YouTube or?
Good question. That I did not check.
And how many people do you think are logging in can you tell how many people are on YouTube?
I should. Usually it shows me at some point. I mean, right now that it doesn't show anything, but I'm sure there's nobody on there right now.
You did you set it up on YouTube or did IT help you?
I did. Well, I had a one meeting with Ewan and Brandon where we discussed it, and then I had one just with Brandon where he walked me through it, and then I set it up.
And who else is doing these?
I would assume they're supposed to use it this week for the applied computer science
So Anna
presentations.
invited her students?
I don't know. I don't know.
How did you hear about the applied computer science students?
I know that because in the first meeting between you and Brandon and me, he said they will need this for that.
Lecture class?
Yeah. So the committee can be on Ring Central, but students can watch it through YouTube.
Oh. What's the YouTube link?
For this now?
Uh-huh.
Okay, let me.
Can you put it into the chat?
No. I can't.
Oh, no. Well, you can do it to me personally.
I can't
Oh, there's Todd.
mess with those
Hey, Todd,
things
how are
right
you?
now.
Good.
Hey, I just read your Q&A. I loved it.
Oh yeah, did it get out?
Yeah.
Oh good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I loved it. And
Did it go out today? And did it go out? Did the new newsletter go out today?
no, it's going to probably go out this week though. So
Oh, okay. So you got a preview.
When you go on here, I can share with you. When you go on to the landing page.
Mm-hmm.
So just for your information,
I
also
just put it
we
in
are
chat.
we are also live on YouTube right now.
What's the YouTube channel?
I send it to your email.
Oh, okay.
Is that better?
What? Sorry?
Is it better for us to be there?
No. Here you can interact with me. Whoever is on the YouTube channel can only watch.
Okay.
So there's right now.
Who else did you only invite faculty or did you?
No,
invite
students. Anna is logging on right now.
Oh yeah, there's Anna. Good.
Yeah, it says 10:09 watching now. Started streaming 5 minutes ago. So, and one like. I'm gonna like it too. So I liked it.
Thank you for liking it.
I had to
Didn't even
reschedule.
start yet. She's liking it. We didn't even know what you like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell my students too.
Who did you share this with, Christoph?
The YouTube link.
Both the thing and.
The Ring Central is students and faculty.
Okay.
And then the YouTube link went to all applicants, undergraduate and graduate.
Oh, students and faculty, all students and faculty?
From
Community?
interior.
Oh. So you didn't share it with the campus community?
No. I want to keep it a little more
On team?
for now, because it's the first test that we're doing.
Okay,
If
so
this-
I'm gonna mute so that you guys so we can respect your.
Well,
Okay.
I have another couple of minutes to start. It's 1:13, so it's supposed to start at 1:15.
Can the YouTube people hear us chit-chatting?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why I warned you.
Hello, YouTube people.
And I will also chat with the YouTube community. So yeah, we'll start in a couple of minutes with our first online presentation here, which I'm very excited about. Okay, so let's maybe get started on time today. So thank you for joining us here. It's my first try. Well, we've been doing online lectures now for all of our classes for the last 3 weeks, almost 3.5 weeks already. So we're pretty good with that now. And today's the first attempt to do the presentation online using Zoom, but at the same time also streaming it live on YouTube. So welcome to all of our friends on YouTube. I hope you're going to enjoy the show. The YouTube channel is going to be about 10 seconds time delayed, roughly. That's just the way it's set up. But you can also post comments there, whoever is there, and I'm going to try to have an eye out for comments if there are any questions in between. But so this kind of series of presentations that I'm starting today will be continued by Heather Peterson next week, another faculty member, where we give short presentations about projects that we're working on or topics that we're interested in order to keep our family feel at the university a little bit more alive. We're all, of course, at different places now, and that feels strange definitely for me, and I think it's good to share a little bit more about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and all these different things. So I want to start today by talking about a project that I did with my architecture and design firm Graft in 2018, so a little bit over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago. So Graft, our headquarters right now are situated in Berlin, in Germany, and so we took part in a design competition for the German Pavilion for the Architecture Biennale in 2018 in Venice, Italy. So for whoever is not familiar with the Venice Biennale, it's kind of the Olympics of architecture and design. There's different country pavilions, and um, always curators get then um, selected. And so we took part in this competition and we won together with Marianne Birtler. She's a politician from Germany, also from East Germany. And so together as a team, we won this with the title Unbuilding Walls. So, okay, hold on here. So, what does that mean, unbuilding walls? Well, this is the German Pavilion. So it's in beautiful Venice, Italy, on the islands there. It's a pavilion that was built under the Nazi regime, and which is actually not important at all for our project. But the important thing for us was that 2018 kind of is this moment of symmetry in Germany for the wall, for the beginning of the wall, the building of the wall, and then the fall of the wall. So the Berlin Wall was up for 28 years. It was originally started in 1961. Then in 1989, the wall fell, which is 28 years ago already. Very, very long time. And I remember I was a student in Germany at that time. And well, as you can probably imagine, it was quite a interesting event there. And so what we wanted to show at this in the pavilion during this time is also this idea of walls. Why are they built, and why are they there, and why shouldn't they actually be there, and why should they be unbuilt? So we looked at Berlin as a kind of a first starting point for the investigations. This, for example, this is a picture of Berlin, the Potsdamer Platz, which is in the center of Berlin in mid 20s, 1925 or something. You can see it's a very urban place. There is trolleys driving around, people running around, and this is then, of course, Berlin was then during the Second World War heavily damaged. So about 80% of the city were destroyed. This is the same spot, Potsdamer Platz, also just after the bombings. So a large part, not just of Berlin, of course, of Germany overall, of Central Europe, were destroyed at that time. And the question then was, how should it be rebuilt, Berlin as well as the rest of Germany, to recover from all of this devastation? And in order to make, or what made it much more complicated in terms of the rebuilding of the city, was the political situation. So after the Second World War, that Germany had lost, fortunately, it was separated into four sectors, which were controlled by the four main winning countries, which was the Soviet Union, the United States, France, and England. And then within this larger context that you see here of Germany, Berlin itself was kind of the same microcosm, also again with those four sectors separated there. So they had to first of all decide, are we going to have a strategy together, or is it going to be separate strategies? By 1949 was kind of separated into two areas now. So the England, France, and the United States had come together, and out of that formed the Federal Republic of Germany in blue here, and then Eastern Germany, which was under the control of the Soviet Union on the right side, and then the little yellow thing here, that's West Berlin. So that's kind of what we're looking at in a little bit more detail. But of course, there was part of a much larger separation within Europe, the Iron Curtain, this long red line that separated the Eastern system from the Western system, capitalism from communism, the Warsaw Pact from the NATO. So two different worlds separated with this very artificial line, this wall, that was just a very big disruption within Europe. And it was a literal wall that really ran this entire length, a big wall, sometimes heavily fortified, sometimes a little bit less, depending on the area that we were in for this. But overall, really a very harsh monument. Even more though when we looked at Berlin itself, West Berlin, which was completely surrounded by this wall. Um, so it's about 96 miles long, or it was 96 miles long. There were very few checkpoints, checkpoint Bravo and checkpoint Charlie you see there, but it was a very opaque border also that was very hard to actually cross around. And it was started overnight. It was a big shock for people in 1961. One morning you wake up and all of a sudden people are starting to build a wall in the middle of your street, in front of your door, with these very, very few checkpoints now. And all of a sudden, your job might have been on the other side and you couldn't get to your job anymore. Or your brother or sister was living on the other side of the wall. So it was really a big shock for everyone. You can see how it runs here through the middle of the street, and the kids here on the right are, I don't know if they're in East Berlin or West Berlin, but they're separated from their friends that are standing on the other side of the wall. Lots of buildings also were torn down, destroyed for that, in order to make it harder to cross that border. Or houses were just closed, the windows, so people could not cross over to the other side of the border anymore. And of course, the official story was that East Germany wanted West Germans to prevent them from coming over. In reality, it was more to prevent East Germans from taking refuge in West Berlin. And so then over the years, it was more and more developed into this very wide death zone here that you can see, with a wall on the left, a wall on the right, minefields in between, dogs, all of these things. So very, very hard to cross. Many people died trying to cross this border wall also. Now, if we fast forward to 1988, 1989, this is when the whole system of the Warsaw Pact of the Soviet Union started to collapse. And part of it was also then the fall of the wall in Germany, which was finally overcome. So was, you can imagine, big parties, everybody was celebrating. I know we raced all to the border right away, and we're just, hugging each other and celebrating. It was a great moment for the two sides of Germany coming back together, and then actually physically tearing down the wall. And you can see here, keep that in mind. So this wall actually was made out of prefabricated concrete elements that were poured off-site and then brought there and set up. And so keep those things in mind, because they're going to be an important part of our design also. Okay, so let's talk about the design and the curation for this pavilion. What we wanted to do was talk about the topic of the wall, of the building and the unbuilding of the wall in Berlin, in Germany, also globally. So we also looked at other walls. But as a curator, we were very much interested in not just bringing information there through text and documents and images, but also to make you actually feel the moment of the building and the unbuilding of the wall. So again, this is the pavilion that you enter here. This is the inside of the pavilion. So, very white, clean building in there, symmetrical. Can like it or not, it doesn't really matter for our attempts there. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a scenario where you actually feel the wall and you don't just see the wall. And you don't just learn about the wall. So we started by taking the pavilion itself, by literally building a wall straight across the pavilion. Of course, we only built a segment of it, not the entire wall. But then to start chopping up that wall right away and pulling it apart, so unbuilding the wall immediately, but set it up in a way where, through an anamorphic effect, when you enter into the space, you actually see the wall as a black strip in front of you, but as soon as you start moving to the left or to the right or to the front, it starts falling apart because of the perspective distortion of the space. So for that, we developed, some of our employees were developing a script to test what would be the best parameters, how should we move these things around in order to get the maximum visibility right outside of the entrance, but minimum visibility at the entrance. So there you really only see the black wall, and then at the same time also have plenty of display areas once you enter into this field of wall segments or wall fragments. So those are some animations that we then did for presentations, also to study how does it work, this effect, does it actually work? And so some more of those renderings. So really when you enter, you have this big black wall, very oppressive, very kind of dangerous looking, but then as soon as you walk to the side, you're starting to fragment the wall into single pieces. And then you start walking into the space there, and then the actual exhibition is on the backside of those wall fragments that are there, and those are those wall fragments that are inspired by the actual Berlin Wall, the way it was built there. So this is the overall layout of the exhibition. So you enter here at the bottom, and then in the first area is going to talk about that a little bit later in more details, what we call the wall of opinions. And then the upper 2/3 are these wall segments, with then also on the back side the exhibition itself. So this is from above here. And then these are already pictures during construction. One problem that we sometimes run into in my company for some reason is that it's hard to distinguish what is actually built and what is a rendering. I don't know if it means that we're doing a good job at doing realistic renderings or a good job at making very artificial looking buildings. Anyway, so here, this is now the entrance. This is an actual photo of the space when you walk in. You can see there's this wall blocking the space, harshly cutting it into two halves. Then when you get closer, you start seeing that it's actually segments of walls. And then when you start walking into it, the wall really starts literally unbuilding itself and becoming these fragments. So you interact in a very lo-fi version, of course. You know, this is not augmented reality, virtual reality, but it's still an interactive space where your movement, the movement of your body creates the experience. And these here are what we call the wall of opinions. I'll tell you a little bit later about what that actually is. And then, so it's a series of TV screens, of course, with interviews, with mirrors on both sides. So it's kind of endlessly long, that wall also. Let's go to the next one here. So these are some photos then from during construction, still during setup. Me and my friends there. And then the backside now with the actual exhibitions, which were mostly, well, there were some historical things, of course, in the exhibition, but also a lot of projects then that played a role either during the time of the wall or at the time after the wall. So we looked at these different places within, for example, along the Berlin Wall here. So this is West Berlin, East Berlin. Different important places like Checkpoint Charlie, the Parliament, Potsdamer Platz. Looking at those in a little bit more detail, but also the subculture that developed there. I moved to Berlin. When did I move there? In 95. But I started going there a lot right after the wall came down. And there were tons and tons of super amazing techno clubs that were all in abandoned buildings or bunkers or areas along the Berlin Wall. So it was really, really great nightlife there. So we looked at those things, also these kind of more emergent things that happened, unplanned things that happened, festivals. This here, down here at the bottom right, that's the Tacheles. That was a very important club also, but also there were artists in residence were living there. The clubs, the dancing, incredible things going on there. Very lively thing. But then we also exhibited projects that are happening now after the wall had come down, or well, years and years later now already. For example, the new headquarters for Axel Springer. It's a publishing house in Germany. So OMA designed their new headquarters there, which are, I think they're still not finished, even though they were supposed to be finished. I have to check on that again. So really trying to look at it from many different perspectives. What how does this wound heal now also? What is happening there now? What are the opportunities? The memorial for the war also that is still there in Berlin, of course. And church that is also built there. And then the actual exhibition there's very few fragments actually left of the wall, and you see it's deteriorating also. It's a big problem right now how to preserve those things. All the way then to the German Parliament buildings that were also built along the former border. But I don't want to talk as much about these different projects. I think it's more interesting to talk about the exhibition design and this kind of experience that you made there. We also looked then not just at Berlin, of course, but also the inner German border in total, at the areas that were destroyed also there, where entire villages were abandoned, destroyed, what that meant also for the people living there. And then from there, we went to the larger context and looked at walls around the world, walls that are still there in many, many different countries. In Cyprus, for example, there's a wall separating the island into two. Israel at the Gaza Strip, also the wall there. Of course, also here our local wall to Mexico. So we looked at these different ones, did some research, and then sent a team of filmmakers there that were interviewing people at every one of those crossings. Talking to people from both sides of the border always, and we always were trying to find people that were in support of and that were against it. Because we wanted to try to create give everybody opportunity to create their own idea of that. So that's what you see here on the left, the screens, and then with those mirrors on the two sides, it really just endlessly multiplied that. And so you could sit there, you could listen to the people talking about it. These are just some stills from those walls. The one here at the bottom is in Cyprus, for example. The one at the top is the Gaza Strip. US-Mexico border at the top. This is in Ireland, the one at the bottom. So it's Korea, South Korea, North Korea at the top. Now I forgot which one is at the bottom, I'm sorry. Another one of them. So, it's not a unique thing, and there still is a lot of borders around the world. One interesting side note maybe was that the only place where we could not find somebody in support of and against the wall was actually in Tijuana. We could not find any local resident that was in support of the wall. On the US side, we could, of course. And so those were these kind of videos then where people would talk about their experiences and tell us about those things. And that was my little story about the project for the German Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2018 about the building and unbuilding of walls there. Okay, I can let this run in the background also. Any questions from anyone? Well, from the one that aren't Ring Central. The YouTube ones are 10 seconds behind. Ingalil, yes, please.
So thank you, Christoph. I found that presentation refreshing. I love the project even more now. I didn't understand all of the nuances because I'd seen images, but I love the anamorphic qualities. So thank you for that. I had a question for you that actually brings this project into today, and wondering if you and Graft have talked about how this project, or even just speculate, how might this project be different now, given the pandemic crisis that we're in now? And I guess the question I would have is that as curators, last year you were clearly, or 2 years ago when you were developing this project, you were clearly coming from a place that walls, are separators. They keep people apart, and are in general negative that the negative, the negative effect is
Yeah.
the significant effect. So one question is there ever a case for walls? And today's crisis comes to mind as a way into that conversation. So I would just like to hear some of your observations about that.
I think we have to distinguish between different kinds of walls. So, what the exhibition was about was really walls between countries, so on a very, very large scale. Um, and there's definitely reasons for it. I mean, there's protection of countries from other countries. There's protection of your citizens. It is a problem also, but it is always questionable for how long they make sense and how oppressive they can be. In the long run, I think on those national level, it doesn't work. Eventually, people will overcome the borders because the issues just have changed too much to keep their validity up. If we go to a smaller level, of course, we live within walls. All of our houses have walls, and I'm pretty happy that I have a wall right now, especially that it's raining again. It's been raining in LA a lot, so but uh, maybe without getting too much into those different details, but I don't think it would have changed. The pandemic would have changed that specific topic. I think those are two separate things. The pandemic is more about, for me, is going to influence much more our ideas of globalization in general. Um, the just the idea that we're sending a team to was 7 different countries to interview people about their opinions about their local walls. I don't know if I still would do that, for example, because maybe we should really keep more local and minimize this exposure to or the travel in general.
Thanks. I like the conversation about local as well. Thanks.
Yes. So yeah, but I think it would be interesting to revisit definitely some of those topics in a year or two. But we also need more critical distance, of course. One reason also why we thought after 28 years after the wall came down, it was enough time that had passed to really look back at it and understand better what was going on. While you're in the middle of a crisis of the pandemic, for example, right now, we can't really understand what's going on and what we're actually doing, and how to avoid that in the future. We need some time to reflect, I think. Other questions?
Christoph, you see my question there in
Oh,
chat?
sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, here. I have to go to the chat. How was it received by the visitors? In general, really well. I think the it was really appreciate. Well, two things were always pointed out. One was that this idea that it was an experience rather than just reading labels and informational. So people really enjoyed that and understood that also what we tried to achieve with this, and then enlarging the conversation into this international discussion about borders, showing these other borders. I think that also helped people to think about it um, in a more detailed way. Because everybody's, of course, especially 28 years later, everybody would agree the Berlin Wall was bad and horrible. But then if we start looking, at the US-Mexico border or the Cyprus wall, these different places, people start thinking, well, maybe there were good aspects also. And we have to be a little bit more careful with our judgment. And even though, I'm not in support of any of those big walls, I think they don't make a lot of sense. Yeah. Other Let's see, there's nothing more here.
I have a question, Christoph.
Sure.
Hello?
Yeah,
Can
go
you
ahead.
hear me? Yeah. Maybe I missed the beginning, but what significance had the location of the pavilion for the project? Where was it located there?
Oh,
Exactly.
it's the pavilion is part of the Venice Biennial in Italy, Venice, Italy. So every 2 years, there's a big architecture exhibition. Well, this year it's actually postponed, I think. It usually starts in May, beginning of May, but I think they pushed it back to September. But so every 2 years, there's a big exhibition with a curator that curates the entire thing. But then there's country pavilions, like the US has one, and Germany has one, and France and England, and so on and so forth. And then each country can curate their own pavilion, and we were selected to do the one for Germany in that year, 2 years ago.
Okay, and the pavilion represented Germany.
Yes, yeah.
For the year.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Well, then, if there's no more questions, then I would say thank you all. Oh, if you want to see more of those videos, you can go. Wait, let me actually put that link for you somewhere. Hold on. I just. Here we go. So there's more information on here, but also what I think is by now more interesting, all of the different all of the different those videos, which I think are really well done, which I can say because I didn't do them.
Christoph, I have one other question.
Yeah.
In the design process, did you rely solely on 3D modeling or computer modeling, or did you make small models, or how did you know that the effect would actually work, right? Like when you walked in, that effect of having this black wall in front of you, I noticed you had to color the floor and you had to color the back walls, and it wasn't just the slabs. I guess the slabs had to get taller as they got further back, so that your perspective, and some people are 5 feet tall and some people are 6 feet tall. So how did it work the way you wanted it to, and how did you kind of measure all those things before you actually built it?
Well, it was all done digitally. So let's maybe go. I mean, you saw in that one animation we had the script was written by some of our students as interns. No, some of our employees, younger employees. They wrote the script with the different parameters, and we played around with that, and it was purely done with 3D modeling. It works, if your eye level is at, I think we put it at 4.9 or something like that, kind of the average height. And of course, it doesn't work perfectly for everybody at the same time, but it worked really, really well, I think, overall.
Yeah, and the coloring of the black, and did you have to control the light coming in, or no? You just kind of
No, the light is there's plenty of light coming in, and you see a little bit of the curvature in the images when you're there, but it's so overpowering when you walk in there that you don't see the details right away.
Right.
And the space is pretty bright, but that makes the black look even blacker.
Cool.
So did you try to use virtual reality or augmented reality for that?
No, we discussed all of those things, but we decided in the end, no, we're going to go actually with the result as low tech as possible. It's just walls. Well, and videos then, but we also didn't do that in the development, but we did a lot of walkthroughs, animations for that to test it.
Did you see the lecture earlier in the year by Virginia Sanfratello?
Yes.
And I refer to her specifically because she and her partner Ron did the teeter-totter design for the wall. your project seemed to, you were sort of replicating or referencing very specifically the design of the Mauer, the German wall in Berlin.
Yeah.
Did you have any other, you had the division, you had the sort of curvature at the bottom, what other thoughts, the height, I assume? I mean, what other parameters did you use in terms of?
It's roughly the proportions of the actual elements, but not exactly, because each element had to be different and because of the visual distortion, of course, the anamorphic effect. But we also talked about that the backside with the displays on it, that's kind of like the graffitis on the western side of the wall. There was another thing another image that we kind of liked for that.
Yeah, no, that was nicely done.
Yeah. Okay, so then I will let everybody go again.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. And join us again next week when Heather is going to talk to us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Now I have to stop this.